Howdy folks, welcome back to War Always Changes. Today we will be going over a tier list for Season 11 in Conflict of Nations World War III, and I will give my personal opinions on each of these units and where they lie on the S through F tier. Now, some people have been asking, why isn't there a new unit for this season? Well, the reason being, mercenaries, which were previously going to be exclusively locked as an elite unit, are now going to be integrated as a tech tree unit, which is absolutely phenomenal on Dorado's part. Thank you. So yeah, honestly, I think it's well worth it to not have a new seasonal unit as long as new content is going to be playable for everyone forever. Pretty fantastic. But yeah, honestly, the elite bomber and elite attack aircraft are, spoilers alert, fantastic. So overall, this is a pretty good season anyway. I know a lot of people are pretty happy about having the opportunity to unlock the elite attack aircraft, considering it's basically better than the normal strike fighter. Well, moving on, I guess we'll probably go from left to right, starting with the elite bomber. It is absolutely awesome. Yeah, no, this thing, as a bomber, it's pretty lackluster because it's not stealth and it doesn't have bunker busting capabilities like the standard bomber, and it's not stealth like the stealth bomber. So as a bomber, as in itself, it would probably be C tier, but as we all know, this thing can launch ballistic missiles. And yeah, that's pretty just insane. Sure, you can launch ballistic missiles from ballistic missile subs, so it's not completely unique in having a mobile unit that can launch ballistic missiles, but it is the only aircraft that can launch ballistic missiles. I would almost say S tier, but I can't quite say that, simply due to the fact that missile gameplay is it's not very cost effective, and I would say that generally speaking, going for ballistic missiles isn't going to be giving you a better chance of winning unless you're playing against noobs or just people who took the risk and didn't have any missile defense. So yeah, since missiles themselves is not a great way to go, I would still say A tier. If missiles were in a bit of a better spot, I would say it's S tier, but at the moment it's A tier. Moving along, we have the Elite Attack Helicopter. Now, this thing is basically geared towards fighting armor like the normal attack helicopter, but it still does more damage against soft targets than the standard attack helicopter. Yeah, this thing is pretty freaking great, mainly due to the fact that it's stealth. Having a stealth helicopter is just absolutely awesome. Sure, it can get spotted by stealth revealing technologies as well as stealth jet fighters. They can spot stealth aircraft, so that is a disadvantage and is a pretty hard counter against this, so it is by no means invincible. Every single time I use these things, they just absolutely clean house. But there's one thing that holds this elite unit back, and that's the fact that the helicopter officer does not get stealth even at the max level. This thing is kind of capped to its potential, unlike some of the other units down here, as to where if you want to increase its attack substantially by having an officer in a stack with these, you're going to lose your stealth capabilities. And that is pretty unfortunate. I want to give it S tier. It almost is an S tier unit, but nah, I mean, having the ability to stack elite units with officers, in my opinion, I think it's mandatory. Maybe not mandatory. It's necessary to make them OP, but I would say it's somewhat balanced, but also, I mean, you can't deny having this versus having standard attack helicopters. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to say A tier. I'm sticking with that. Alright, now for the elite main battle tank. Now, this thing is just absolutely insane. It's a chonker, and it even has some missile defense, which makes sense because, if you play War Thunder, you've probably seen that tank that has the shotgun turret basically on top of it that can somewhat protect it against tow missiles and whatnot. But yeah, no, it's basically the only way to get the absolute maximum amount of hit points into a single stack, which in a game which penalizes you for overstacking, that is absolutely amazing, even if it's not necessarily the most cost effective. The elite main battle tank is just ridiculous. It's really good, especially since it can airlift at, if I'm not mistaken, this thing can airlift at the first level, which is just insane. And you don't even need to level this thing up to the max level in order for it to be good late game. Yeah, no, the elite main battle tank, it's a clear S tier, it's a winner. Now let's go to the elite railgun. This thing, it's fantastic because I don't know if it's mid tier or late tier. This thing gets anti-air capabilities as well as being an artillery piece, and that just makes it good. That alone, it's kind of lackluster as an anti-air and as an artillery piece. Having them both in one unit is just absolutely fantastic. If you have rocket artillery, yes, you'll be able to outrange this thing. And if you have, elite attack aircraft, as we'll talk about in a second, sure, you'll be able to potentially out damage this thing if it doesn't get an attack and defense air attack. But this thing is just such an amazing all-rounder, and it's considered an armored unit, which I would say probably helps its case. Not to mention that this thing does 11 damage against armor at the maximum level, which is just, wow, that is just insane, at least in the European doctrine. But yeah, no, this thing is S tier. It's just, it's too good. And that's kind of why I don't use it all the time, because it's a little bit boring with how good it is. Anyway, let's move on to the elite attack aircraft. Now, they have nerfed this thing since its release. So I would say right off the bat, it's not going to be S tier. It's fairly balanced, just because of how vulnerable it is to anti-air as well as air superiority fighters. But it's just so cost effective, and man, this thing just absolutely wrecks soft targets, armor. It's a beautiful unit, especially when you research air superiority fighters. You can research these in tandem, and then you don't even have to deal with strike fighters. And not to mention, they are carrier based. Wow, I really want to put them in S tier, but I wouldn't say they're quite that broken. They're just a good unit. They can be countered, and they're really good against cleaning up AFK nations. I'm just going to say that. And in the zombies game mode, I would say the EAA is absolutely mandatory. Now we get to one of my favorites, not because it's good, but because it's unique. It is the AIP Submarine. This thing is basically just a coastal version of the attack submarine. So it's going to be horrible out in the deep waters, and it's going to be absolutely killer in shallow waters. Now, through my experiences, if you get a hidden strike on someone who isn't at war with you, that is where these things excel, at first strike capabilities. What I've heard is that these things are invisible to sonar unless you're within view range, which makes sense because these things only have an attack of 50, whereas in the late game, everything else is going to have basically an attack range of 100. But one thing about this game that's a little bit scuffed is if stealth units start getting attacked by an enemy ranged unit, even when they are out of view range and they are in fact stealth and invisible, as long as you are within the attack range of the enemy, they will still hit you and they will still damage, which honestly kind of negates the stealth of this thing. And that stealth zone, if I'm not making it clear enough, it's within the 51 to 100 meter range, or however long the sonar distance is. So basically, you will always get the first attack on this thing if you're active and you're pressing the attack button, or you have it on the aggressive firing mode. But if someone else is active and you are not, then it is pretty easy for them to take these out while you're AFK. So unfortunately, due to the simple game mechanics of this game, it really just isn't that good. But man, if you're an active player, you can really make use of these. And it's the only submarine that's good in coastal water, so that actually counts for a lot, especially when you're fighting cruisers, which is one of the most meta or most used tech tree units. It has a lot going for it. Unfortunately, if someone starts attacking you and you're not able to get away in time, they're going to be able to get at least 2 counterattacks, and that is just quite unfortunate. These things do not have a lot of HP, so they can't take a lot of hits. So I'm going to have to put this thing into C tier until Khan fixes their stealth mechanics. Moving on, we have the Elite Loitering Munitions. Now this unit, basically it's deployable gear like the Elite UGV, as we'll talk about in a second. It's deployable gear, so it's a little bit expensive, especially in the early game when you don't want to be spending rare materials on that kind of stuff. Basically, it sits in a specific location, it scouts. If an enemy comes into its patrol circle, it attacks. It's single use, kind of like a missile, and it sucks. It's really bad. Basically, it's so low health that the enemy has to have like near 0 air defense in order for this to be useful. Against motorized infantry, useless. Against tanks, if they don't have any anti-air, which is rare, pretty good. But that doesn't happen very often. One thing I have encountered with this thing is that if you don't have any units with the ability to scout, this can actually save your butt. For example, on multiple occasions when I've deployed these in a hot war zone, I have seen special forces that I had no idea were there. So it can surprise you with how useful it is, but for the most part, it's a waste of time. It can be used by quite a lot of units, so I would say that's a perk. One thing I didn't know until recently is that jets can actually, for some reason, engage these tiny little drones and shoot them out of the sky. And that really, just for me, killed the unit. Like, it's bad. It's horrible. F. It's F tier. I'm not giving it another thought. It is F tier. Moving on, we have the Elite UGV. Now, a lot of people kind of hate this unit. They think it's stinky, but personally, I love this unit, and I certainly think it's a lot better than the Loitering Munitions. Again, this thing can scout like those, but this also has radar. It's not just a temporary unit, it can actually be used normally, and once you're done using it, it can be undeployed, which is pretty neat. But yeah, this thing, it has an army boost, so when paired with, say, a stack of mechanized infantry, the damage can, be a little bit better than it was previously. This thing is pretty killer when it comes to city combat, which is where the majority of it happens. So it can either be defensive or offensive when you're, conquering or whatever. I think this thing is pretty great, pretty versatile. Unfortunately, it isn't quite cost effective, but with the amount of abilities it has, I would say that kind of makes up for that. But to be honest, people aren't going to be using it until a later game, which does cut down on a lot of the use. And I don't use it that much personally, even though it's not overpowered. So I'm just going to have to put this in B tier. I would like to put it higher, but I would say it's just perfectly balanced. B for balanced. Let's go. And lastly, we have our newest seasonal unit, and that is the Elite Frigate. Now, this thing is unique because it can actually carry a small amount of helicopters on it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, no, this thing, it's weaker than the regular frigate in most ways. However, it is pretty good against missiles as well as submarines. But personally, I don't really encounter submarines that often, so I would say it's more of a downside than upside. The way the stats kind of shift around there. But having the ability to, launch missiles and have, say, ASW helicopters does give it technically the highest potential damage out of, more than the frigate for sure. I don't know if it's more than the cruiser, I doubt it. I don't know, I think it's a lackluster unit. Every single time I've tried to utilize it as like an early game carrier, it doesn't carry that many. I don't know about you guys, but every single time I deploy elite frigates, they just get killed by cruisers or destroyers or literally any other type of ship. I might just be bad at the game, as I've said before. I've just never been impressed with this unit. I think it's good that it's balanced. It's a little underwhelming, to be honest. So I think I'm gonna have to designate this to the C tier. Well, there you have it. Those are my personal opinions on all of the elite units as of Season 11. And yeah, I mean, as I've used these units more and as they have been balanced over time, my opinions have changed. I think this is probably a little bit more accurate than my Season 8 tier list. Let me know what you think. Tell me if I'm absolutely wrong and stupid or if you agree. But yeah, I think that wraps up this video. Sorry for all the ums, buts, and long pauses, but thank you for bearing with me, and I hope you learned a thing or two. But yeah, I'm honestly just, again, super happy that Dorado decided to move mercenaries into the tech tree instead of having them as a seasonal unit. Absolutely fantastic that they listened to the community on this one, and again, look forward to my review of them when they come out as the tech tree units. And yeah, thank you for sticking till the end. See ya.